Ever wonder why so little gets done on the environment? It's because those leading the charge are a part of the problem, a part of the establishment in DC. There's always been a big gap in America between the rich environmentalists and the working class environmentalists. The rich environmentalists like to focus on theory and parades, while the working class environmentalists like to focus on cleaning up the river that could poison their kids or the smokestack near their office. It is true though, we have seen bolder and bolder commitments to climate change and cleaning up the environment, but that has largely been due to average working class Americans doing what they can to raise awareness, while those in DC make backroom deals. It's not them, it is their bosses in the top 10 environmental organizations that headquarter themselves in DC, work in DC, make all the decisions in DC in order to appease big money donors. And they have a different agenda. A lot of them have portfolios that include fossil fuels and lithium mines. Every green bill follows heavy investment in those industries from monopolies in DC that then profit an extraordinary amount and have lightweight legislation. This means they want slow change. Change so slow it will never help you, your family, or the environment in time. We must realize that the DC establishment poisons all causes. How? Because every cause has a headquarter in DC to appeal to those big donors, and those same donors are behind every problem that good causes aim to solve, like the environment. We need to stop letting the criminals run the bank, letting the polluters run the environmental charities, letting individuals actively destroying the world save it. No real change will ever come from DC. There are 1,000 mechanisms, laws, and incentives designed to prevent it. Think about how environmental charities work. They take big money from a donor, use it to advertise to Americans to get them to donate money and time in even bigger amounts, and then this goes back to DC to benefit those running the top 10 organizations and working with the establishment. Are we trying to grow more politicians? Is that the goal of the green movement? To grow homemade politicians in DC who then betray us? Why don't we just cut out DC money? Cut out the DC influence and have local offices in cities and states focus on real environmental issues on the ground where these communities actually exist, and then go to DC to have our voices heard as a group. This, we are told, will never work, that we need a bunch of representatives who are good at talking to money to go to DC for us and behind closed doors make decisions that impact the entire world. Does this sound familiar? It should, because this is exactly how politics works. Politics outside of the environmental causes. A general corruption that hurts every cause. They tell us we need a lobbyist to fight lobbyists. Perhaps they're right. Give them the benefit of the doubt that we do need a sustained presence in DC to get things done and get the environmental movement on a faster track, but not as unelected charity members talking as lobbyists to donors, but as ourselves. How can ordinary people, ordinary Americans, be represented in DC? Well, technically, that's what representatives are for in Congress, which is why the DC establishment compromised them first. We need to change the establishment directly, not through shadow ops or lobbyists or through backdoor meetings with donors that always turn out to be corrupt and impossibly slow. To this, many say the Democratic Party is the answer. If we team up for the environment, we can push them to really represent us. This is exactly what the rich environmentalists have told us to do over and over and over for decades. The Democrats are the answer. The Democrats are the answer. The Democrats are the answer. All you need to be is a more fanatical Democrat and everything will work out magically. But think about that for one moment. It removes their equal contributions to climate change and corruption in DC, to the decades of building the oil and gas industry from its infancy till now, and the huge subsidies and investments and the ocean of money being thrown around in which they all swim. Think about this. The Democratic Party is older than cars. They are older than the use of oil in this way for combustion engines. They predate the vehicles to which they now claim to be fighting. They helped on every cog, every piston, on every policy since the inception of this industry. And yes, during the cover-up periods, decades before, they admitted that they knew it was contributing to climate change. They all knew, they all participated, and they all helped cover it up because they knew that the money would stop. They were an integral part of the global oil market, and it paid generations of Democrats dark money to get into office. And they built DC together with the oil and gas industry and the Republicans to be a free-for-all, to turn normal politicians in the 1970s into the majority of millionaires that are there today. There are no more normal people in the Senate or in the House of Representatives. Congress is now a millionaires club because of these people and their selling out of the Americans. There are the grandchildren of oil barons in the Democratic Party today. This illusion that the Democratic Party is green only lasts back a decade when they did outreach to try to bring in the environmentalists who were making the DNC look bad and making the Democratic establishment look bad. They were just trying to moderate the left that was leaving them, which we now see today being more obvious, to try to all coalesce behind the DNC and corporate money and corporate objectives. The truth is, the environment isn't left or right, isn't Democrat or Republican. It affects us all equally. And the only hope we have is to build a new party by the people that doesn't accept money from any industry, that would slow down change for the environment beyond logic, beyond science, purely for profit, not because of common sense solutions that may be on the table. This is not an response for radical environmentalism, but practical environmentalism, for what ordinary people need, run by ordinary people without bribes. Independent parties and independent candidates are the only real way to get the environmental objectives into DC, into policy, and into real change. We will never be able to protect the environment in time following the Democrats, the establishment, and DC as it is today.